And so it begins. Picked apart. Too incompetent to be comical. Selection 1. The light side of the Star Wars universe, but mostly the Jedi. There are some people or organizations that make you wonder how they succeeded in the first place. Now, we're not talking about the ones that were created to be lucky yet comically incompetent, like Inspector Clouseau or Maxwell Smart or even Inspector Gadget. No, this isn't about that. What this series is focusing on is those that were presented as having the skills to succeed and the competence levels that make them great, but once broken down don't really hold up and only just serve to show the writer's bias because the good guy always wins. Break for intro. And we're back. When we are first introduced to the rebellion in Star Wars, we know nothing other than that they are fighting against a superior group that is bad. This explanation is acceptable on the face of it, but not deserving of long-lasting allure. Unfortunately, as the universe expanded and the retcons flowed, their incompetence grew to the point where one wonders how they managed to become a real threat to the also increasingly incompetent Empire. Starting with the Jedi from the prequel trilogy, we learn that at some point in history, these Paragons of Peace somehow defeated the Sith, a group of more powerful individuals, if not more numerous, that wanted nothing more than to conquer everyone and everything. They were more powerful mostly due to their rage-fueled emotional combat techniques, and with proper training they could have been a very powerful foe to be sure. In fact, to become a real threat to any competent peacekeepers, they would have to have some measure of control, though that was never really explored in the series. As presented, they might have burned themselves out within fights, but canon-wise, one Sith could take on a large group of equally leveled Jedi. As presented, the Sith Empire would have imploded long before they were a real threat to anyone, but somehow they did survive and a threat they became, like the no longer canon of Revan's Academy. Additionally, there were the Mandalorians, who, as presented, could have been a significant threat because they were not double dealers like the Sith of later ages. They were just very militaristic with some glory hounds interspersed between them. But Sparta of Old Earth proves that militarism with adaptability can survive almost indefinitely. If the Sparta had been a bit more flexible and adaptable, they would have been one of the first empires of Earth history. Yet, despite this, the Jedi of that age didn't want to interfere, despite their stated objective being to keep the peace. The exact nature of the canon of the Mandalorian Wars is sketchy at this point, but we know that it took the will of a soon-to-be Sith named Revan, whom the Mandalorians did eventually learn to respect, to rein the Mandalorians in. Of course, in so doing, he fell to the dark side, only to be relieved later. Really, the Jedi Council was a group of old fogies that hated what they didn't understand and had some influence and used that to forbid emotion and anything that they couldn't control, just because they knew they couldn't handle it. Yet, they did persevere and banned anything that might lead to the dark side, and they ignored as best they could, and they only really used any kind of fight or battle techniques or lightsaber work as some kind of weird meditation like Tai Chi. After the defeat of the Sith Empire and the Sith's self-imposed exile and the Rule of Two, which is some incompetent nonsense if you ask me, not much headway was made in making the galaxy peaceful and fulfilling for anyone. A competent group of peacekeepers at this point would learn what they could of anything that could be used against them so that they could have some defense rather than enforce total suppression of bad stuff, hoping that no one would find it. This is because no matter how forbidden something is, someone will try to learn it and about it. And when it is forbidden, only the bad people who can't control even themselves, let alone the forbidden thing, will know anything about it and or could use it with any effectiveness. Thus, the forbidden automatically becomes a threat if left to the natural order of things. It seems a lot of good people forget this sage advice of understanding something and controlling it, if not just to find a legitimate defense against it before it becomes a threat. And this, of course, will be noted in later episodes. This understanding, of course, being that the best defense would be knowing something about it. Knowing is half the battle. So we move on from ancient history and legends, and eventually we learn that one of these bad Sith, Sheev Palpatine, aka Darth Sidious, did hatch a plan and not only managed to expertly maneuver both sides of the eventual conflict, he did it basically in front of the all-powerful Jedi. Yes, somehow he shielded his maneuvers from the Jedi, whom we are supposed to believe forewent the use of Force lightning and aggressive techniques, in lieu of using the Force for only knowledge and enlightenment. How ironic. I'm just saying that they should have seen this coming. Assuming, of course, they actually sought to become one with the Force and learn about, stuff. Would a Jedi lie? Somehow, though, after this show of mastery, Palpatine slacked off and let the Empire become increasingly shoddy and this rebellion do whatever it was they wanted to oppose him. In review, old Sheev managed to start a war and get these peacekeepers that hated fighting to fight quite effectively. Really, they played right into his hands and still thought somehow they were keeping the peace in the galaxy. In the end, he does get what he wants. The First Galactic Empire! Which could also be picked apart, though others have already done so quite effectively. You should see Media Zealots, link below, review of this. Once the Jedi realized the real threat was looming overhead, did they regroup? Did they plan? Did they start a guerrilla operation? No. The ones that weren't slaughtered outright went into hiding and self-imposed exile of their own to sulk and wait for a or another chosen one to solve all their problems. That is pathetic. I mean, really, at this point they should have been good fighters even if for 1,000 generations they have abstained from fighting. They have been fighting a war for all this time, after all. Now we get into the Rebellion era. When first presented, we get a modicum of competency in the face of overwhelming force, an interesting, if ostensibly one-off villain for a one-off hero. There was some issues as the original trilogy progressed, but that could simply be the bad guy getting increasingly miffed by his more incompetent stooges and a greater competency for their supposed enemies. After all, we didn't have a pre-New Hope empire to compare it to at this point, and up to that point, there may not have been a legitimate threat to this empire that could make any real accomplishments stand in their way. Then, the prequels started to degrade any real hope of the ability or status of the empire, but, really, that could have been handled better. The movies, whatever. It definitely should have been better. Even that was short-lived, it appears. As The Force Awakens shows, the New Republic was so incompetent after they defeated the First Galactic Empire that a Second Galactic Empire managed to be started right under their nose, and they amassed such a levels of power and money one has to ask, did this New Republic actually do any governing? Did they actually know what was happening in their area of influence? I have so many issues with The Force Awakens and even Rogue One that even though it was mildly entertaining, it almost killed off my fan status of the franchise. I don't have time to cover it here, but comment below if you really want to hear my rant. After all, Now the Resistance is underfunded, undermanned, underskilled, and the whole movie delegitimizes the struggles in the original trilogy. At least Jar Jar Abrams could have come up with something new. At least Luke Skywalker continued the now proud Jedi tradition of, when faced with a problem, run away and hide for a chosen one to swoop in and save the day. There were a few problems with The Last Jedi. Again, if you want a complete rant, comment below. Any group that has to wait for a chosen one to save them doesn't really deserve any lasting respect. Oh, by the way, these people won't even train new members of their own group to do whatever it is that needs to be doing because they can't or won't do anything themselves, and they don't deserve to exist. Anyway, this automatically makes them too incompetent to be comical. All in all, we're supposed to root for these people because they are the good guys. And of course there's also something about the underdogs, but really, underdogs are underdogs for a reason. Come on. But if it really came down to trusting my fate to these paragons of virtue, these Jedi, I wouldn't. Do you know of any other people or organizations in fictional tales that are too incompetent to be comical, or something else that deserves to be picked apart? Let us know below. We really hope you enjoyed this presentation. Please like and subscribe for more over-analysis of fictional groups and organizations. You might find our other presentations entertaining. Click on a thumbnail to be transported to another storyboard. Thanks for watching. Dan out.